Now, let's take a trip across to the United States of America. John Solomon is with us, award-winning investigative journalist, founder of Just the News, because there's some very odd things going on in the political world over in the United States. Of course, we're underway with the, the race for the White House. We've got Joe Biden, who can't really race anywhere. We've got Donald Trump, who keeps getting arrested. It's a very odd world we now live in. John, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here, Mike.
People say to me all the time, I lived in America for 10 years back in the days of Ronald Reagan, when it used to be a much more sensible world, to be honest. You could sort of knew what was going on. It's a very weird world at the moment in the States, isn't it? I mean, every time Donald Trump gets indicted, he raises more money, he gets more popular, and he himself says he gets one step closer to the White House. So what's your take on what's going on there?
Yeah, listen, we're in uncharted waters without a doubt. We are seeing a Democratic machinery in these cities and in Washington bringing multiple cases against former President Donald Trump. There are now 9 civil and criminal cases, all destined to collide in 2024, right in the middle of the election. 4 of those are criminal indictments: Atlanta, New York, Washington, and Florida. And all of them are seeking trials right in the middle of the primary and general election season.
Yeah.
So to a lot of Americans, this smacks of political interference. They see a Democratic administration trying to take on its top political opponent in the court system, try to sideline him, perhaps sue him and say he can't even run under the 14th Amendment. A lot of concern about the behavior here. And what's interesting in the polls, you mentioned it, Donald Trump keeps going up. He's raising tons of money. While that's going on, Joe Biden continues to fall in the polls. And in fact, for the first time since 2019, when I broke the first stories about Hunter Biden, you're now seeing a majority of Americans believe that Joe Biden did something corrupt with his son. So 2 dynamics are going on. Joe Biden has a corruption scandal that we were told in 2019 was a conspiracy theory. And Donald Trump, despite multiple indictments, they're going up. If you and I were going to write a political novel, I'm not sure we would be this creative to come up with these plot lines.
Right. Well, absolutely right. I mean, I've got a story here that's on your social media account. The National Archives and Records Administration acknowledged possessing potentially up to 5,400 emails connected to Joe Biden's pseudonym accounts that he used to forward government information and discuss business with his son, Hunter. And I mean, I think people all around are beginning to now see that there's something fishy going on here. And every time there's a Hunter story, there seems to be another indictment coming down the pipe for Donald Trump.
Yeah, you have to wonder if number 5's around the corner. I don't think so based on my reporting, but people say that all the time. Yeah, this is a very important, this is a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request that I made in 2021. It's now ripe and going to litigation. Southeastern Legal Foundation suing because the National Archives has these emails. They won't make them public. And so we're trying to compel them through lawsuit. What's interesting here is that Joe Biden now has a Hillary Clinton problem. Remember back in 2015, Hillary Clinton had the email scandal? Well, now Joe Biden had 5,400 emails where he was conducting some form of government business on a private email account. And the ones that we've been able to get a hold of, either through sources or through the Hunter Biden laptop, you see instances of Joe Biden taking sensitive information about foreign affairs and sending him to his son. In one instance, it involves the release of an American prisoner. It's not public. It's information that came secretly from the U.S. Embassy in Turkey. It goes to Hunter Biden. Another time, Joe Biden's about to meet with the Ukrainian president by phone. He has a phone conference, and Hunter Biden is hooked in. Well, that's interesting because Hunter Biden had millions of dollars of business in Ukraine. What we do know about the emails makes us a lot more concerned. You see multiple members of Congress now planning to subpoena these documents and try to force them into public. We're suing in the courts.
And this is when he was vice president in the Obama White House, presumably. But also, you'd have to ask the question, wouldn't you? Why does he have all these pseudonym accounts? What's that for?
Yeah. And also, remember, he had what appears to be a drop phone. He had all of these different ways that these multiple accounts in his family where money's hopping around. You've heard James Comer, the primary Republican antagonist in Congress, pursuing Joe Biden, saying he's acting like a mobster. He's got private accounts, LLCs that have no purpose except to move money. Now he's got drop phone. He looks more and more like a criminal, according to the Republicans investigating him. This scandal is only going to get larger as we head into the fall. And of course, the big question facing America, will Republicans pursue an impeachment inquiry? The soundings are getting louder and louder from the House that they may go that route.
And that's an interesting one as well, isn't it? Because the latest indictments coming down in Georgia for Donald Trump, they've used, in my view, ridiculously, the RICO statutes that were invented sort of by Rudolph Giuliani to trap the mafia, as if to kind of go, well, if we say that he's like the mafia and the Trump White House was like the organised crime, and it was, you know, people will start to believe it. It's almost as though they're trying to convince everyone by using it, that's why they're doing it.
Yeah, that's a great point. A lot of people see in these Democratic attacks, and quite frankly, the strategy going back to 16, that Democrats take things they were doing, like getting money from Russia, and turn it around and try to project it on Donald Trump or Republicans to negate their own exposure. Remember, Hillary and Bill Clinton took lots of money from Russia. There was a whole Uranium One scandal, and then they concocted the Russia collusion case. Here, you got a racketeering case alleging a corruption in government. You go back, that's what Joe Biden may have been very well involved in. A lot of people see a projection strategy of taking Democratic sins and trying to make them look like Republican sins. We'll see how that plays out when we have the court to play out. And, of course, maybe an impeachment in Congress.
Well, this is it. I mean, we know, for example, the New York case is pretty flimsy. I think in December the judge is going to decide whether or not to even take it to trial, because that hasn't even happened yet.
Right.
Florida, again, similarly, you know, it's about a lot of boxes of papers, which you might as well do Joe Biden for as well if you're going to do Trump. You've then got the situation in Washington, D.C., which looks pretty flimsy as well. And then even Georgia. I mean, I tell people all the time, I don't really see any of these charges sticking, because the whole point about the Georgia case is that you have to believe that Donald Trump knew that he hadn't won the election, that he had to be convinced somehow that he had genuinely lost. And how can you prove that?
Yeah, well, in fact, there's documents showing that his investigative team was telling him there were legitimate concerns still to be done. So he's going to be able to point to that when the evidence comes out. Your assessment is exactly what one of the most famous liberal law professors in the country is, Alan Dershowitz, a Joe Biden supporter, by the way. He voted for Joe Biden in 2020. Said, listen, none of these cases meet the test of criminality. These are all political speech or other protections that will come in here, and he expects a lot of these to get thrown out somewhere in the legal process. If a liberal who voted for Joe Biden thinks that way, imagine what a lot of everyday Americans are thinking right now.
Well, you know, I'm finding more and more people in this country who might not even like Donald Trump particularly. They can see that it's a political inspired plot, basically, to try and just make him look bad, because they think, like they did the other day with the mugshot, they think by putting him into a county jail that people will go, oh, he's in jail. You know, oh, look, there's a mugshot. He doesn't care, right?
Yeah. Listen, I think I was on a plane ride back from Milwaukee the other day. I was sitting next to a person who had emigrated from the country of Georgia, not the state of Georgia, but brought up our Georgia and said, listen, I fled Soviet occupation for things that are now going on in America. I'm a little worried that the America I came to is starting to look like the Soviet Republic I fled from. Those sentiments are very powerful as you look across the country. A majority of people think that these prosecutions of Donald Trump are political in nature. That's a very important fact. And then the growing number of people, now a majority for the first time, who believe Joe Biden was involved in corruption. That does not bode well for Democrats, no matter what strategy they're pursuing right now.
And it was put to me the other day that Vivek Ramaswamy is kind of Donald Trump's chosen operative, and that the reason he didn't do the Fox debate was that he kind of more or less directed Vivek to do it for him, if you like. And he's the guy that maybe, if he does run and he does win the nomination, might be his vice president.
Yeah, listen, some people think that Vivek is very adamant. It's not the case, but he brings a youthfulness and a vigor and a particular appeal to libertarians, which are becoming a larger part of the Republican Party. He's a fresh face that looks very different, very much like Donald Trump looked when he came down the escalator in 2015 running. And like, who's this guy? What's this about? Vivek is creating that same sort of buzz right now.
Okay. And so do you think, I mean, a lot of people also say to me it's a shame that Biden and Trump, again, is the only real choice that people are going to have, that there isn't somebody better coming through the system, that somebody's not really emerging. DeSantis has kind of been a bit disappointing. Do you think it will be Biden against Trump again?
It certainly looks that way in the polling now, but I've been covering elections for 35 years. There's a lot of history between now and the first vote in January that will play out. A lot of ads will be run. The dynamic could change. But if everything stayed as it is, these indictments seem to only strengthen Trump. Joe Biden seems to be very intent on running. We could have a Trump-Biden rematch, and it would be pretty remarkable for many reasons. First, the two oldest candidates in the history of the United States running against each other, and a lot of sentiments, maybe a vast majority of Americans saying, can't we do better than this? Right. We'll have to wait and see whether that answer comes true or not.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. John, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. John Solomon, award-winning investigative journalist, founder of Just the News. Incredible story about these 5,400 emails, which we've told you there for the first time exclusively, that Joe Biden's pseudonym accounts were used by him